In this video series, we're going to make a Greenland Kayak paddle entirely with hand tools. There's plenty of videos out there showing you how to make them with power tools. There's plenty of videos showing you how to use them. I'm not going to do any of that. I discovered Greenland paddles a year or two ago, and I made one last winter, I guess, and paddled it this season. Really loved it, and I want to make some more. And I'll go over why I want to make some more. This is my paddle, the one that I made. It's made from a 2x4. I got it at Home Depot. It cost $3.10. It was I think it's the right way to start. You don't need to buy a piece of cedar and make your first paddle, because you probably will mess things up. I've certainly had my share of mess ups. I have two paddles over there in the scrap pile. So the paddle I'm making today will be my fourth paddle that I've started, and hopefully the second one that I've completed. And when I show you the wood, I'll go over the mistakes. Let's talk about the tools first. I'm not an expert on woodworking, and by a long shot I'd like to be. I'm fortunate in that my father-in-law has lent me a lot of tools, and he was very good at taking care of them, and they're extremely sharp. And that's great, because dull tools are crap. You don't want them. Let's go over the tools. Bic mechanical pencils. What are they? 1/2 millimeter. These are great. You can buy them for next to nothing, and they draw nice sharp lines, and you never have to sharpen them. You just click and it's there. So get some mechanical pencils. You want a good straight edge. You know, it's possible to use a piece of 2x4, but you need a ruler anyhow for making one of these. So you might as well get one. I happen to have a meter stick here, not a ruler, and that's fine also. A meter stick is great if you're doing, one of my other hobbies is making guitars, at least starting to make guitars, and you need that for cutting the frets. So I have a meter stick, but it's no big deal. It's a little bit longer than a yardstick. I also have a clear straight edge. It happens to be a ruler also, but clear is really nice because it lets you see better, and for shorter lengths it's good. Clamps. You need clamps. I'll be using at least 2, possibly more. I have a lot from other projects, so get some good, down to the hardware store, your local hardware store, your local big box store. Get some. This is my favorite tool of all time, I think. You've probably seen bigger squares like this, but there's something really nice about a small square. It's 6 inches long, and it just really works well when you're working on smaller things. I'm not building a house, I'm building a paddle. It's made out of a 2x4. So I really recommend this. Obviously, one of these will work. If you happen to have it around, don't go buying one of these. Good tape measure, we'll use that in the initial cuts, but the yardstick, meter stick will work better. I'm a real fan of this saw, the Stanley Sharp Tooth. They're not that expensive, and they cut really well. Cuts on push and pull, and for rough cuts, which we'll be making only a few of, and I'll show you why when I get to cutting, you'll want that. This is a chisel. This is a really sharp chisel. It's also a Stanley. My father-in-law took really good care of this, and he's happy that I'm using it. So I showed him I was using it. That's kind of cool. It's really sharp. It looks like a hammer, but it's actually a special hammer, I guess. I don't know. This is rubber, and so when I'm whacking with the chisel, it doesn't bounce back. It is not a dead blow hammer, but a dead blow hammer would also work really well. I think hitting with the metal end, I think that's a bad idea. A metal hammer, I think you get too much bounce, that'd be a problem. And then my 2 favorite tools. This is a Stanley block plane. It's incredibly sharp, and you need to have your block plane be incredibly sharp. If it's not sharp, it's junk. You're not going to be able to cut. You'll be able to curse a lot. You'll gouge your wood. Sharpening it, there's other videos. I'm not going to show you to sharpen it. Sharpening is kind of fun. It's almost like a meditative thing. You just put some good music on, sit down with your sandpaper and your honing stone. I happen to have a Veritas guide for sharpening, and I really recommend that. It really makes it a lot easier. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of getting the angles right. You need a good flat surface. A lot of people say use a piece of glass, and I didn't like the idea of having a piece of glass sitting around the workshop. And I went to the big box store, into the flooring section. I got a single piece of marble floor tile, and it was like $2. It's great. It's absolutely flat, and yeah, it'll break if I drop it, but it won't break into 1,000 pieces and kill me. This is a spoke shave. This was a Stanley number 4. The other numbers, the other block planes, I'm not a block plane expert. I'm sure the others are just as good. You don't want a tiny one. I think for the finer work, we'll be using this, which is a spoke shave. It's sort of like a block plane, but different. It's got the same basic idea. You have a sharp, very sharp piece of cutting edge and a finely polished, machined flat surface. I had never used these tools before I made my first paddle, so it's not, don't be intimidated by it. It's actually pretty easy. Just step one is getting them sharp. The other tool, I didn't bring it over, let me go get it. This is a Japanese saw, and it cuts a really fine line, and I think I actually might use that on the paddle, though I'm not sure. There's a section which I tried using the chisel and I wasn't happy with how it turned out, so this might actually work. So, the other thing, our paddle's gonna be a little different. This is a ferrule, carbon fiber ferrule from Gear Lab. It's $50, I think. It's not at all necessary. First paddle I made did not have one. My first paddle cost $3. This is useful because transporting Greenland paddles is difficult. They may fit inside your car. If not, you're tying them to the roof rack. They're not like your traditional paddles where you break them down in half and then you go. This paddle I'm making is for my wife, and I know that she doesn't want to deal with the hassle of having a long paddle, and so I bought this. We'll see how it goes. It means that part of making it will be different, and you'll just have to guess how to make the middle part. And when I make my next paddle, maybe I'll put another one in. I have two, and we'll see how it goes. Let's get this out of the way. I'm going to talk about wood now. I showed you this paddle, my first paddle, made with a piece of, they call it whitewood. Is it pine? Is it spruce? Who knows what it is? It's what Home Depot sells in the construction area, or your local big box store, your local hardware store will sell them. You want to have it so the grain is straight. It's not all curly like that, and you want to have it fairly knot free. As a matter of fact, make sure it's knot free. Your first paddle doesn't matter. I've got a knot right here, and it's a weak area. It's harder to work, but it's sometimes a pain picking through the piles of wood at your lumberyard. And when you do that, put it back neatly. Don't throw them all back. You won't be invited back, and then you'll wreck it for people who do take care of their stuff. This is just a regular 2x4. Oops. It's a regular cedar 2x4. I got it at Lowe's, and that's because my local Home Depot doesn't sell cedar in bulk. My local, and I'll show you the good piece later. And I drove at 1 hour and 15 minutes to find this, so it's worth driving to get good wood. This has a knot there, you can see it, and a knot there, but I know from how I cut it, actually has a lot of knots. Yeah, actually, I know from how I cut it that it will, they'll be cut away. And I'm actually wondering if this is a piece of cedar. It feels awfully heavy. This could be a piece of junk 2x4 I have sitting around. No, it's cedar, it's cedar. This cost $12. Last year when I bought the cedar, it cost $10. I don't know. Okay. If you don't feel like picking, you can get a piece like this. Our local Good Lumber Yard and local Good Hardware store sells clear and knot-free cedar. And that's wonderful. You can take pretty much anything from the pile and you're guaranteed it's going to be a good piece. And this was $35. And I brought it home, and you can't really tell, but it's actually marked out for a paddle of my dimensions. And then before I put a block plane to it or a saw, I got freaked and said, I'm not going to wreck a $35 piece of wood when I don't know what I'm doing. And so I went and got the $3 piece and made that. Let me just show you the mistakes. Yeah, the basement isn't great. This is the second paddle I started. You can see it's already cut in half for the carbon fiber ferrule. And the mistake is that when you're making a paddle, you're making a paddle specific to the person who's going to paddle it. You know, when my wife paddles her paddle, I won't want to paddle it. It'll be too small for me. Likewise, my paddle will be too big for her. And it's not just if you're a kayaker, you know, 210 centimeters, 215 or 220 centimeters long, depending upon the width of your arms and the width of your boat and all that. For a Greenland paddle, you know, where you're paddling like this, there are times when you want to take it out and grip it like that. And you have to be able to hold this comfortably, okay? And she has small hands, and so I cut this fairly small. And she's also not a tall person, and so the length is short. And in further reading, I realized that there are some dimensions you just shouldn't go under. Particularly, you shouldn't go under, I think, 82 inches, and you shouldn't go under about 3 inches here. And so this is 2 3/4 inches or 2.5, I forget which. And so I decided to abandon it. You can also see that it's beautifully cut. I went to a neighbor's house and borrowed his bandsaw, and borrowed his bandsaw. He cut it for me. I don't know how to use a bandsaw. And in making this project, I realized I wanted to do something entirely by hand, not using any power tools whatsoever. For this one, I used a jigsaw to cut out the fine stuff, and that didn't work out too well. And then we come to today's paddle. The third paddle I started. Boy, it's tight here. We can see here, it's actually looking pretty good. You can see that there's various markings on it, and I started spoke shaving down here, but this was just for practice because this is the good end. This is the lousy end. There's dust on it. Look how thin that is. This will break. You know, like that's way too thin. I didn't read the directions before starting out this paddle. I said, hey, I've already made one. I'm going to read the directions. We can call this hubris because this is it was a good lesson. But the nice thing is, I was midway through this when I realized I wanted to make this video. I was like, no one wants to pick up in the middle. And so now that I've built hubris, I can start over again and build a paddle. Talk to you guys later. I forgot a few things when I recorded the other stuff. Like I said, I don't have a script, and I'm not a video guy. I'm just a guy. You need 3 more things. The first one is free, which is really kind of nice. There's a PDF you can download off the internet by Chuck Holtz called Making a West Greenland Paddle. this is, I think, is absolutely essential. You need this. It talks about the history of Greenland paddles, the styles of paddles, how to use them, how to make them. It even shows you how to paddle, how to use a block plane or a knife with the grain, not against the grain. It has wonderful diagrams of all the steps, the cuts you have to make. It has them labeled out in W and T and L and S and all that. And in particular, and most importantly, it tells you how to determine those dimensions based upon the person who will be using the paddle. And so you can see here that I have my cheat sheet where I have all the dimensions I measured on my wife, and I've translated them into this. So I know that this is not 2/3 of the paddle length, it's 15, okay? And so it's, I think, a pretty essential resource. You really do want this. Brian Schultz of Cape Falcon Kayak, it's a wonderful resource, his site. He's primarily a builder of skin-on-frame kayaks and now skin-on-frame canoes. But in his store, he has a $7 PDF that is also how to build a Greenland paddle. It's not so much for the beginner, I think. I like some of the measurements here. This is, I guess, more of an engineer approach, and his is more of a woodworker approach. I don't know how to say it, but I do think the two PDFs complement each other, and I really think you should get it. Besides, he's a great guy and could use some support, right? We could all use some support. The third thing you need is a workbench. If you have a wood shop, that's great. I have a basement. You can probably hear my furnace just kicked on, so it's probably louder now. It's got a nice table down here. It's about 10 feet long with a good clamping surface. And over there in the middle of the floor, I have a floor clamp. Floor clamp's not essential, but it's okay. It's essential. I don't know. You could do these things without a floor clamp, but you'll need a really good workbench. My workbench isn't that great a workbench. So I hope that's it. Talk to you later all.